Please, mister, just pretend you're my father so they won't take me. The terrified little girl whispered this plea to a man who had everything, a man who thought he had nothing left to live for. Unaware the stranger was a billionaire, she was about to change his life forever. Before we dive into the depths of Victor Stark's transformation, drop a comment below and tell us what you would sacrifice to save your family. Now, let's begin. The cold was the only thing Victor Stark felt anymore. It seeped through the tailored wool of his suit, through the thick Italian leather of his shoes, and settled deep in his bones, a perfect reflection of the hollow space where his heart used to be. 6 months. 6 months since the world had fractured, since the laugh of his child had been silenced by a screech of tires and the terrible, final sound of twisted metal. Victor walked, he didn't care where. The financial district of the city was a fitting purgatory, all glass and cold steel, reflecting a life he no longer recognized. He was a billionaire in exile, a titan of tech whose company, Stark Dynamics, now ran on autopilot, managed by people who knew better than to disturb the sleeping giant. He was adrift. He passed the perimeter of the sprawling city park, the iron fences topped with ornate spikes seeming to hold back a world he no longer wanted to touch. He looked at a bench, seeing in his mind's eye a tiny, joyful figure feeding pigeons, and the wave of grief was so immediate, so crippling, that he had to stop and grip a lamppost. It was in that moment of absolute, paralyzing despair that the collision happened. Not a hard impact, just a frantic scramble, a whisper, and the fragile weight of a small, trembling body pressed against his legs. "Please, mister," a voice impossibly small and urgent pleaded into his coat. "Please just pretend you're my dad." Victor blinked, pulled violently from his sorrow. He looked down at the girl. She couldn't have been more than 8. Her clothes, a faded, patched dress and worn canvas shoes, were soaked from the damp air. Her hair was a tangled, dark mess, but her eyes, wide and darting, held a fire of sheer desperation that mirrored his own inner chaos. Lily. Before Victor could speak, the danger materialized. 2 men in cheap, dark suits rounded the corner of the path, their faces set in grim, determined lines. They scanned the area with the predatory efficiency of those accustomed to control. Their jackets bore the small, embroidered logo of the Haven Initiative. "There she is," one of the men barked, pointing. Lily's small hand tightened on the sleeve of Victor's $5,000 coat, a desperate anchor. She looked up at him, and in that fleeting second he saw not a stranger but a reflection of a vulnerability he understood. That look, raw, terrified, and pleading for protection, shattered the glass cage of his grief. Victor straightened, the years of commanding boardrooms and closing billion-dollar deals immediately snapping back into place. His posture shifted from hunched despair to rigid authority. He wrapped his arm around Lily, pulling her securely against his side. "What is the meaning of this?" Victor's voice, unused for serious negotiation in months, was low, resonant, and laced with palpable threat. The 2 men hesitated. They saw a worn-out, terrified child. But they also saw the expense of Victor's suit, the diamond flash on his cufflink, and the absolute, unshakable confidence in his bearing. "Sir, we apologize," the taller agent stammered, recovering slightly. "That girl is a ward of the Haven, a runaway. We need to take her back to care." "This is my daughter, Lily," Victor stated, the lie smooth and utterly convincing. "She merely got separated from me during our walk." He reached into his inner pocket and produced a card, not his personal card, but one bearing the logo of the quiet, high-profile charitable foundation he funded, a name known to every minor official in the city. The men's expressions melted from authority to uncertainty. They exchanged a look that clearly communicated, "We don't get paid enough to deal with this level of wealth." "Our deepest apologies, Mr. Stark," the shorter man said, quickly reading the card. "We, must have been mistaken. The child we're looking for has lighter hair." As the agents retreated, Victor felt Lily's small body slowly relax against him. The trembling stopped. He looked down at the top of her dark head. The silence that fell between them was profound, broken only by the distant sounds of the city. Victor led Lily out of the park and into the back seat of a discreet, armored sedan he kept on call. The contrast between Lily's worn canvas shoes and the pristine leather interior was stark. He took her to a penthouse suite he reserved for visiting dignitaries, a place with no personal history, no ghosts. Once the door was sealed, the sanctuary established, Lily finally broke. She didn't cry, she just stared at him, her eyes old with premature wisdom. "Why did you do that?" she asked, her voice raspy. "You don't know me, they'll come back for me." Victor poured her a glass of filtered water, his hands steady. He sat opposite her, not too close. "Why did you run away?" he countered softly. Lily's defense mechanism, the hardened facade, began to crack. She told him about Nolan, her 5-year-old brother. They were orphans. She explained the fire, the way she pulled him from his crib, the terrifying sounds. "I saved him," she whispered, her hands clenching into fists. "I saved him, and for 2 years I've been his mum. He has the nightmares still, and he won't eat unless I'm there to remind him." She explained the Haven's true malice, the separation, the classification, the talk of moving Nolan to the disciplinary wing. "They said I was too old, 8 is too old, and they wanted to move Nolan so he could learn independence. But he can't, he just gets scared. I can't let them take him away, he's all I have left." The details struck Victor with surgical precision. Lily wasn't a runaway, she was a soldier fighting the last battle for her only family. Her desperate plea for help, the assumption that a powerful, kind father figure could solve the problem, was an act of profound, desperate faith. Victor thought of his own child gone forever and realized that in this small, fierce girl he had found something to protect, a reason to fight. "They won't take him," Victor said, his voice now entirely the old, dominant Victor Stark. "I won't let them." He summoned Robert. Robert Andrew, Victor's long-suffering legal counsel, arrived within the hour, his face a mixture of concern and professional exasperation. Robert had managed Victor's legal affairs through the darkest depths of his grief. Seeing him now, animated and resolute, was shocking. "Let me be clear, Victor," Robert said, running a hand over his silver hair. "You just committed what could be construed as aiding and abetting a runaway minor, obstruction of justice, and essentially kidnapping, given your deception of those state agents. And now, you want to use the full weight of Stark dynamics to adopt 2 severely traumatized children you met an hour ago." "I want to adopt them, Robert," Victor corrected, his eyes fixed on his lawyer. "And I want to do it immediately. These children need a family and a safe home. I have the means, they have the need. Make it happen." Robert shook his head, but he saw the unyielding determination in Victor's eyes. This wasn't a whim, it was a desperate lifeline. "We'll start the process, but the Haven Initiative, while charitable in name, is state-backed. This will be a war, Victor. Are you prepared to fight for years?" Victor looked over at Lily, who was curled on the expensive sofa, finally asleep. "I'm prepared to fight for forever, Robert." The next morning, Victor, armed with Robert and a sense of cold, unshakable resolve, walked into the main offices of the Haven Initiative. The place was a fortress built of smiling, brightly colored propaganda. Posters about hope and future lined the clean hallways, a jarring contrast to the desperate fear Lily had described. They were met by Anastasia William, the director, mid-40s, tailored, with a practiced, thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. She radiated an oily, self-satisfied professionalism. "Mr. Stark, what an unexpected pleasure," William purred, offering a hand Victor pointedly did not take. "We understand you have a temporary interest in one of our former residents." "My interest is permanent," Victor stated, cutting through the pleasantries. I'm beginning the process of adopting both Lily and her brother, Nolan. I demand to see Nolan immediately to assure him of his sister's safety." William's smile didn't falter, but a coldness entered her eyes. "Mr. Stark, while we appreciate your sudden, generous impulse, adoption is a lengthy, complex process, particularly with children as damaged as the Andrews siblings. Lily," she sighed dramatically, "is a troubled child, displaying severe behavioral issues, manipulation, and an unwillingness to integrate into structure. Nolan, sadly, has pronounced developmental delays and separation anxiety, largely exacerbated by Lily's codependency." "She saved his life, Ms. William," Victor reminded her, his voice deceptively soft. "A traumatic event that fuels an unhealthy attachment," William corrected smoothly. "We cannot allow you to see Nolan. It would disrupt his new specialized care schedule, which is designed to teach him independence. Furthermore, your status as a single, recently bereaved father with no parenting experience makes you, frankly, an unsuitable candidate. I suggest you donate to the Haven and leave the real work to the professionals." The stonewalling was absolute. William was protected, entrenched, and clearly viewed Victor as a temporary inconvenience. Victor knew then that Robert was right, this wasn't a negotiation. "Ms. William," Victor said, rising slowly, his eyes locking on hers. "You have refused a generous, stable, permanent home to two children who have been failed by the system. I assure you, your refusal will have consequences you cannot possibly afford." As Victor and Robert left, Victor was already on the phone. "I want the best private investigator in the city, Robert, one who can find the dirt under the polished floorboards. I don't want to just adopt these children, I want to burn this entire place down." Victor's penthouse war room was operational within 48 hours. Laptops glowed, legal pads covered the massive dining table, and the finest pie he could buy, a meticulous woman named Janet Rodriguez, presented her initial findings. Janet, a seasoned investigator with a no-nonsense demeanor, laid out a series of financial documents and heavily redacted state reports. "The Haven Initiative isn't a charity, Mr. Stark," Janet began, her voice grim. "It's a perfectly legal scam. Lily's behavioral issues are her refusal to stop protecting her brother, her asking too many questions about missing children." Janet pointed to a complex chart detailing state subsidy payments. "The state pays a premium for children classified as unadaptable or severely emotionally traumatized, to 3 times the rate for a healthy child placed quickly. By keeping siblings apart and exacerbating their trauma, William and her board ensure the children remain high-cost, long-term wards of the state." Nolan's separation from Lily wasn't about independence. It was about maximizing the profit margin on both children. Victor felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold grief he had carried. They weren't just neglecting children, they were manufacturing trauma for profit. Janet then produced the original file on the Andrews siblings. The fire, it was electrical, no foul play, but Lily, she was 5 years old. She woke up, found Nolan, who was 3, and carried him through the smoke-filled house. She saved his life. Every mention of her defiance in the Haven's file is her fighting for Nolan, mediating conflicts, even smuggling him treats. She's a little hero. The information hit Victor with devastating force. He realized the depth of the enemy's corruption. They weren't fighting a bureaucracy, they were fighting a sophisticated criminal enterprise disguised as child welfare. "I need every detail," Victor told Janet, his voice low and dangerous. "William's personal finances, the names of every board member, every failed adoption attempt. I want to know who is being paid off and who is signing the paperwork that seals these children's fate." Victor looked at the picture Janet provided of a frightened, tiny Nolan. He looked at Lily, asleep in the guest room, exhausted from her fear. He swore an oath that the immense weight of his money would be used for one purpose: justice for the children. He reached out to his contacts. the editor-in-chief of the city's largest newspaper, the head of a federal child advocacy organization, and a highly respected child trauma psychiatrist. The pieces of the bomb were assembled. He was ready to detonate. Victor was preparing to unleash his arsenal, a detailed report from Janet, a front-page expose, and a federal injunction, when Anastasia William made her move first. The call came just before noon, cutting through the focused silence of the war room. It was Robert, his voice tight with controlled alarm. "Victor, we have a major problem." William moved. "She filed an emergency order with Child Protective Services. They're accusing you of multiple felonies, child abduction, interference, and child endangerment. They're coming for Lily, Victor, right now." Victor's heart hammered against his ribs. He felt the familiar rush of adrenaline, but this time it was mixed with a terror he hadn't known since the accident, the fear of a threat he couldn't control. "Robert, initiate the emergency plan," Victor ordered. "Get the injunction against William filed now." But it was too late. The arrival was swift and brutal. Detective Sarah Martinez of the Chicago PD and a sharp-faced CPS agent named Karen Phillips were at his door within minutes. They were armed with badges, stern expressions, and legal authority. "Mr. Stark, we have a warrant for your questioning and an order to take the minor, Lily Andrew, into immediate protective custody," Detective Martinez stated, her tone uncompromising. Victor, though prepared for a fight, was forced to comply. He knelt before Lily, who was pale with fear. "Lily, I need you to be brave. I'm going with them. Robert will be right behind me. You are safe. Do you understand? I am fighting for you." He was escorted to a sterile police station, Robert following close behind. Lily was taken to a separate room with Phillips. In the interrogation room, the pressure was immense. Karen Phillips, a master manipulator, didn't threaten Victor physically. She threatened his conscience and his memory of loss. "Mr. Stark, you are a grieving man lashing out at a responsible state institution," Phillips said with oily smoothness. "You are not a parent, you are a liability. We are offering you a chance to cooperate, return Lily, and avoid charges that will ruin your company and your reputation." Then came the knife twist. "Furthermore," Phillips continued, watching Victor's reaction carefully, "your interference has further destabilized Nolan. He has been transferred, as we warned, to a highly secure, specialized facility outside the city, a place where his trauma can be managed without the burden of an unstable sibling. You have lost both children, Mr. Stark." The words were a calculated strike. Nolan was gone. Lily was terrified and alone. Victor closed his eyes, his vast power suddenly useless against the grinding, bureaucratic machinery of corruption. His rage was a solid thing in his chest, cold and focused. But then Lily was brought back into the room for a final, supervised conversation. Her face was streaked with silent tears, her small body trembling. She looked up at Victor, her expression not one of anger or accusation but of absolute heartbroken trust. She was looking at the last adult she had left. "I trusted you," she whispered, her voice fragile. The weight of that trust, that single, devastating sentence, snapped Victor out of his calculated defense. He realized he was playing their game, the game of legal maneuvering and cooperation. "Detective Martinez," Victor said, his voice deadly calm, "I have listened to your threats. Now I formally report multiple crimes: systematic child abuse, conspiracy to inflict psychological trauma for financial gain, and fraud in adoption proceedings. And I have the evidence." Phillips scoffed, but Victor ignored her. He looked only at Lily, letting the rage drain away, replaced by a terrible resolve. Lily, watching the adults stare each other down, took a ragged breath and delivered the final, most crucial blow. Tommy isn't with a nice family, Lily whispered, her eyes fixed on the shocked face of Karen Phillips. He's still at Riverside in the quiet room, the one in the basement where they hurt the kids who cry too much. The silence was absolute. Phillips went visibly pale. Victor knew instantly that Lily had just handed him the truth, the key that exposed the lie of the secure, specialized facility. The shock of Lily's revelation hung heavy in the air. Victor was momentarily stunned, but the paralysis lasted only a second. The system hadn't moved Nolan, they had punished him. The stakes had just soared from legal custody to imminent danger. Victor refused to be intimidated. His lawyer arrived, immediately leveraging Victor's immense contacts to secure a rapid, conditional release. Victor was out within 2 hours, Lily by his side, but the conditions were severe. He was under house arrest in his penthouse, forbidden contact with any witness or law enforcement entity related to the case. Ignoring the conditions instantly, Victor converted his penthouse into a command center. Lily, though exhausted, was the core of his intelligence. Victor knelt before her, his voice gentle despite the roaring war drums in his mind. "Lily, you were incredibly brave," he said, taking her small, trembling hands. "Tell me everything about the quiet room, everything you know about the basement." Lily, fortified by the knowledge that her secret was believed, spoke with the terrifying clarity of a child who had seen too much. She described the room: no windows, a thin mattress, a bucket, and isolation for days. She explained that it was reserved for the children who acted out, which meant crying for their families or, in her case, asking too many questions. "It makes them quiet," Lily concluded, her eyes vacant. "They don't ask about adoption anymore, they just stop." Victor felt a sickness in his gut. They were not just profiting, they were torturing. He mobilized his team, instructing Janet and his security chief, Marcus, to proceed with the highest possible level of discretion. They used Lily's fragmented memory to draw a rough map of the Haven's labyrinthine basement, past the industrial laundry, behind a decommissioned boiler room. "Marcus," Victor ordered, his voice flat with lethal resolve, "I don't care about warrants or procedure now. I care about a 5-year-old boy in a black room. You have 48 hours. Get me in there and get Nolan out. Use the press coverage we prepared as a smokescreen." Victor's team created a public spectacle. A massive, televised press conference announcing the launch of the Sarah Stark Foundation, named after his late child, dedicated to investigating and reforming child welfare laws. The goal was simple: draw Williams' focus to the legal and media battle while the real action took place in the shadows. Meanwhile, a top investigative journalist Victor contacted, Rebecca Torres, began quietly assembling the pieces: Janet's financials, Lily's terrifying testimony, and a history of strangely aborted adoptions at the Haven. The media bomb was primed. Victor sat with Lily, reading her a child's book he had once read to his own. He looked at her, truly seeing her strength. She wasn't a victim. She was a witness, a survivor, and the unexpected, fierce protector who had pulled him back from the precipice of his own despair. The rescue operation began precisely at 3:00 a.m. While William was fielding frantic calls from the media and her board members, all distracted by the public war Victor had started, Marcus and his team slipped into the Haven. Victor, ignoring his house arrest, drove alone, following the secure feed from Marcus's camera. He arrived at a service entrance just as Marcus's team breached the final basement door. The environment was exactly as Lily had described: sterile, damp, smelling of disinfectant and despair. The air was thick with a silence more terrifying than any noise. They located the quiet room, a small, padded cell behind the industrial washers. When Marcus forced the heavy lock, the scene confirmed every one of Victor's fears. Nolan was huddled in the corner, his small frame rocking back and forth, clutching a filthy, tattered teddy bear. He was pale, dehydrated, and utterly mute. He looked like a wild thing, not a child. Victor pushed past Marcus, ignoring the lingering scent of stale fear in the room. He knelt slowly, deliberately, keeping his posture non-threatening. "Nolan," Victor said, his voice barely a murmur. "I'm Victor, Lily's friend. Your sister sent me to bring you home." Nolan didn't look up. He pressed himself further into the corner. "Please don't hurt me," he whispered, his voice cracked and tiny. "I'll be good. I won't ask for Lily anymore, I promise." The words, the perfect recitation of the trauma inflicted, struck Victor with the force of a physical blow. The rage he felt in that moment was purifying, incandescent. This wasn't grief, this was righteous fury. Victor didn't touch him, he simply sat on the cold floor, letting the child feel his non-aggression. "Nolan, I'm not going to hurt you. Your sister is safe and she is waiting. She never stopped fighting for you. We need to go see her now." It took 10 agonizing minutes. Finally, Nolan slowly lifted his head. He looked at Victor, then at the camera in Marcus's hand, then back to Victor's eyes. Something in the absolute certainty of Victor's gaze, the lack of fear, broke through the child's terror. Nolan unfolded himself and launched his small, trembling body into Victor's arms. Holding the fragile, terrified child, Victor felt a shift that redefined his life. The hollow in his chest wasn't gone, but it was filled, not with a memory of loss, but with the immediate, visceral need to protect. This wasn't just a rescue, it was a birth. He was, in this moment, a father. As they exited the building, a furious, disheveled Anastasia William appeared, alerted by a panicked night guard. "Stark, you are trespassing, you have no authority. I will see you ruined, you self-righteous." Victor didn't break stride, he looked directly at William. Nolan clutched to his chest. "You tried to break this child for profit, Ms. William," Victor said, his voice cold and flat. "You are finished. The war has just begun." Chapter 8: The Billionaire's Crusade. Within 12 hours of the rescue, the carefully constructed facade of the Haven Initiative exploded. Victor had released the coordinated attack. Rebecca Torr's front-page exposé hit the newsstands. "House of Horrors! Tech Titan exposes child abuse network disguised as charity." The article detailed Janet's financial data, Lily's terrifying testimony of the quiet room, and the shocking photos Marcus took of Nolan's confinement. The public reaction was immediate and seismic. Protesters descended on the Haven. Politicians scrambled to distance themselves from William and the facility. Victor, using his newly established Sarah Stark Foundation, addressed the press from his penthouse, ignoring the ongoing legal threats. He didn't rant or weep. He presented the facts with the cold, devastating logic of a man who had built an empire. "This is not a mistake, it is a meticulously crafted criminal enterprise," Victor stated into the cameras. "The Haven didn't fail these children, it manufactured their trauma to maximize profit. My son, Nolan, and my daughter, Lily, were profit centers. Today, we turn that profit into justice." The foundation took immediate, decisive action. Legal offensive. Robert Andrew filed a class-action lawsuit against the Haven and every board member, freezing all their assets. Federal intervention. Victor's federal contacts, presented with irrefutable evidence of financial fraud and systemic abuse, initiated an FBI investigation. Agent Cooper, a sharp federal agent, took point. Healing Center. Victor bought 3 entire floors of a secure medical facility, establishing a specialized trauma center with the psychiatrist he hired. Nolan and Lily were placed there, beginning their long road to recovery. Emotional cost. The climax had a true emotional cost when Nolan, once reunited with Lily, still refused to speak. His trauma had been so profound that his silence was a constant, chilling reminder of the cruelty he had suffered. Lily was hypervigilant, terrified that her brief moment of security would be stolen. Victor was not fighting a clean battle, he was fighting the ghosts in two children's minds. Then, Agent Cooper arrived with a startling development. William was not working alone. She was the node in a multi-state network of facilities all running the same scheme, manufacturing unadaptable children for high subsidies. "This is much bigger than Chicago, Mr. Stark," Cooper warned. "We are looking at systemic fraud across at least 4 states, hundreds of children." Victor looked at the screen, seeing the grainy pictures of similar quiet rooms in other facilities. The sheer scale was staggering, but so was the opportunity for justice. "Agent Cooper," Victor replied, his eyes burning with renewed purpose. "The Sarah Stark Foundation is now yours. Whatever you need, funding, private investigation, legal protection for whistleblowers, it is unlimited. We will dismantle this network state by state, facility by facility. We will save every child we can find." 6 months later. The adoption hearing was a formality, but one imbued with a profound, almost spiritual significance. Judge Hamilton presided, the same judge who had presided over the closure of the Haven Initiative and the subsequent indictments of William and her co-conspirators. The courtroom was packed, not with reporters but with a community of victors making. Robert Andrew, who had shed his cynicism, Janet Rodriguez, now running the Foundation's investigative arm, Agent Cooper, quietly watching, and dozens of new adoptive families who had rescued children from the Haven network thanks to Victor's crusade. Lily Stark, no longer Andrew, now wearing a bright, new dress, sat beside Victor, her shoulders straight, her fear replaced by a quiet confidence. Nolan Stark, no longer silent, though still needing therapy, was drawing furiously in a sketchpad. The final moment of emotional consequence arrived when Anastasia William, gaunt and shackled, was brought into the courtroom. Victor had insisted on her presence not for revenge but for the children's closure. "Mrs. William," Judge Hamilton said sternly, "you are facing life imprisonment. The court will hear your final statement." William stood, her polished veneer finally shattered. She looked at Lily, then at Nolan, her eyes wet with self-pity, perhaps even a flicker of remorse. "I convinced myself that I was preparing them for the world," she choked out. "That making them strong meant breaking them first, but they weren't broken, Lily. She was the strongest child I ever met. I was too damaged by the system to see anything but a line item." The silence was total. Lily, an 8-year-old embodiment of grace, did the unthinkable. She stood up, walked to the railing separating her from the defendant, and looked directly into William's eyes. "Mrs. William," Lily said, her voice clear and small, "I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because carrying hate makes you smaller, and I'm going to be too busy being happy to be small anymore." William collapsed back into her chair, sobbing. The room was heavy with shared emotion. Judge Hamilton, wiping her eyes, delivered the final, life-changing pronouncement. "By the power vested in me, I declare Lily Stark and Nolan Stark to be legally adopted by Victor Stark. You are now and forever members of the Stark family." The room erupted in applause. Victor knelt, pulling both children into a fierce final embrace. "We were always a family," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "The papers just make it official." Weeks later, the three were home. Not in the sterile penthouse, but a sprawling, warm house with a massive yard. The Sarah Stark Foundation had reformed child welfare laws in 4 states, rescued over 800 children, and was now a global force for justice. Victor, once the cold, grieving titan, was simply Daddy. He was constantly laughing, constantly exhausted, and constantly fulfilled. One evening, as Victor tucked Nolan, who now slept soundly, his teddy bear resting safely on a shelf, into bed, Lily came to his study. She found him staring at a photograph of his late child, the memory now carrying warmth, not just sorrow. "Daddy," Lily said quietly, climbing onto his lap, "is it okay that we're your children now?" Victor held her close. "Lily, my love, my other child sent you to me. She knew I needed to learn how to love again, and she knew you and Nalan needed someone to fight for you. You gave me back my life." Lily snuggled into his chest. "We were talking, Nalan and I." "About what?" Victor asked, anticipating the next grand scheme. "Our house is very big," Lily said, looking around the enormous, warm room. "And we know a lot of kids who need homes, kids who are still scared like we were, and we're really good big siblings now." Victor smiled, overwhelmed by the boundless capacity for love and healing of these two survivors. "Are you suggesting we expand the Stark family?" "Only if you want to," Nolan called from the doorway, having crept in. "We know we're probably enough work already." Victor pulled both children close, tears blurring his vision. "Lily Stark and Nolan Stark," he promised, his voice choked with absolute certainty. "You are the greatest gifts I have ever received. If you want to share our home with other children who need love, then that is exactly what we will do, always." As a warm summer rain began to fall outside, Victor remembered the cold rain of that day in the park, the desperate whisper, the lie that became the truth. He had thought his life was over, but it had only just begun. The man who had everything had needed a little girl to teach him how to be a father, a hero, and a whole person again. If Victor Stark's journey from billionaire grief to selfless fatherhood resonated with you, if you felt the chill of Lily's fear and the warmth of Nalan's healing, then you are a part of this story now. The journey of the Stark family and the hundreds of children they helped save is a reminder that there is always hope, even in the darkest of places. If you believe, as Victor came to believe, that love and family are worth fighting for, then please support this channel. Subscribe, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to hear that a single moment of courage can change everything. Let us know in the comments below, what small act of courage have you witnessed that changed someone's life? Your support ensures we can continue to tell these powerful stories of transformation and hope. Thank you for watching.